Good afternoon. Today we'll explore an AWS intelligence technology that supports both security and FinOps governance through a common platform. The primary purpose of founding Secure Cloud Provider was to solve the problems that I experienced while I was on the other side, as the person responsible for approving the tools that integrated with our enterprise cloud environment. Now, the three issues that I primarily was concerned with were the loss of control, the duplicated efforts, and not having the context that was required to see across the board everything that was happening. To break this down, SaaS platforms move cloud telemetry outside of our cloud environment, right? That's typically how they function. They're SaaS, they come from the outside. They have their own account that we don't necessarily have visibility into to understand whether it is secure or not. In addition to taking the telemetry outside of the environment, they introduce an ingress and an egress path, which becomes another attack surface. We have less visibility and less control, right? Then there's the duplicated effort. Of course, we have multiple tools that might be doing 85% of the same thing, but they independently inspect the same cloud environment, require their own tools, their own integrations, their own transactions. This duplicates the telemetry, the costs, and the efforts that are involved for all of those transactions. And then we also lose the context. There is no platform that correlates those findings across security, compliance, and FinOps. We don't necessarily have a root cause. Even where we have really good signals for findings, they're not necessarily mapped across all of the framework controls that we would care about. So we don't have the compliance impact and we don't have the remediation priority either. There's nothing to tell us if you remediate this particular finding, you're going to solve for 25 findings across these 5-7 frameworks. So the objective of Secure Cloud Provider was to create a platform that could be deployed in the client's environment and let the client keep the data. Deploy the platform, keep the data. Then looking at the architecture here, essentially how this works is you deploy it into your AWS account. There's no external account, there is no third-party data repository, and there's no additional ingress or egress path. This then becomes a governance intelligence layer that allows for correlating the findings and then prioritizing and mapping them to frameworks and controls. This allows you to then answer what matters. What is the risk? Which controls are impacted? What's the financial impact? Who owns this issue? And most importantly, what should I do about it? I'm going to quickly share with you now just the dashboard component of the platform so that you can see this in action. Importantly, the dashboards are not the platform. The dashboards are merely a consumer of the platform. But this does give us a good idea of what the platform is capable of. So looking at the dashboard here, which gives us basically a snapshot in time, we categorized issues into 8 different governance domains. 6 of them are impacted, as you can see here, and it tells you here what those are. And then here you see the top remediation opportunities too. And you see the number of production resources that are at risk. Now, the open issues don't necessarily mean this is a number of resources. A single resource could have more than one issue. You might have an EBS volume, for example, that is both not encrypted and also not logged. So that would be 2 different issues on the same resource. Then moving on to governance intelligence, here you can just see that the governance domains are mapped to root causes. Now, we categorized all of these into just 8 domains, but there are well over 70 root causes. So obviously the governance domains map into multiple root causes. Here, for example, data protection is mapped into both missing encryption at rest, and it's also mapped to public data exposure depending on the particular resource or scenario. And then the same for identity and access governance. You're going to have multiple root causes for that as well, and so on. Then over here, you can see the root cause concentration where the largest concentration is this one here, I believe, overly broad resource access policy with 23 resources that have that particular issue. And then 22, where there's a concern of excessive privilege assignment and public data exposure here, weak DNS or name resolution governance, etc. Then moving to compliance obligation impact, here's where those issues are actually mapped to audit findings. Now, audit findings, keep in mind, the audit findings are the sum of all audit findings across all 7 frameworks. And a single framework may have more than one audit finding for a single issue. So for example, NIST 853, you might have least privilege as a finding, you might also have access control as a finding, and it might be the same issue, right? So just with that alone, you might have 2 there, and then another one in ISO, another one in SOC 2, PCI, et cetera. So you could wind up with maybe 10, 11, 12 findings for a single issue. So that's where this very large number comes from. But one of the really great things about this particular sheet is it allows you to drill down into the framework and then down into the particular control and see all the resources that are violating this particular control. So here we see, for example, let's say that we want to scroll down. Actually, let's pop this out first. Then if you scroll down and you say you really just want to focus on SOC 2, you can do that. You can select to focus only on SOC 2. And then you can further say that within SOC 2, you would like to focus only on, say, the logical access security measures. And then you just focus on that. It's going to tell you then all of the resources that violate this particular control. And then you can see the root cause in each case, whether it's excessive network ingress, whether it's overly broad resource access policy or public data exposure, et cetera, and the specific resource, the specific ARN that is the offender. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over a couple of these. The attack surface inventory is not risk oriented. It's strictly mapping. It strictly tells you which resources actually have public exposure. That can be good, that can be bad. Maybe it's a website that needs to be publicly exposed, but it just gives you a map. Just to wrap it up with remediation intelligence sheet, though, I want to show you one thing down here. Now we're going to look into the compliance from a resource perspective rather than a control perspective. And we're going to say, what all does this particular resource violate? We see here, you can see the number of issues that each of these resources has, right? So let's just pick one. Let's see. Let's pick the S3 bucket here. This has two issues here, as you can see. So if we select that, and then take a look at what it says down here, we can see all of the controls that this particular resource violates, right? All of the findings, in other words, for this particular resource. And it's more than one issue. So we have two issues. We have overly broad resource access policy, which itself, this one itself, has a bunch of findings, as you can see. All of these are just that one issue because it's across all of these frameworks. And then it tells you what to do about it. Restrict the S3 bucket policy to approved principals, accounts, organizations, services, actions, resources, right, et cetera. And then down here, we have another finding for the same resource, which is the public data exposure. And that relates to setting the S3 block public access, which is not set at the account level in this account and should be. And it tells you which particular framework controls that particular misconfiguration violates. It tells you how to fix it, right? All right, so now just to jump back over to the dashboards, and again, keeping in mind that the dashboards merely reveal the platform. They are not the platform. Here we can see on the executive summary page that we have governance domains here listed by priority. Some of these are allocation and accountability as tagging. Some are noted as medium priority and others are low. Now, where you're going to get a medium in tags is where there's a secondary governance domain that's impacted. And it's a resource that could potentially have a cost, for example. So where it also violates the resource cost visibility governance domain, then this is going to move this to a medium instead of a low, whereas the other tagging issues would be a low. Then you can see the governance domain, the high-level governance domain impacts here, how many resources are involved for each one, et cetera. Now, one thing to note, the monthly cost exposure, we actually do have monthly cost, but we took advantage of Amazon's offer of credits. And as a result, we're not paying for this month or next month, even though in fact there is a cost. So this is going to show 0 right now because we're on that plan. Now, for the resource drill down, really quickly to show you that, this can be very interesting. Let's look for something. Let's see, EC2 here. We could just take, say, the Elastic IP. This is a good one right here. So Elastic IP, if we want to filter on that, then when we scroll down here, we're going to see the finding detail for the selected resource. We're going to see that this Elastic IP pertains to the EC2 service, and the governance domain is resource activity and waste. Persistent, unused resource allocation is the root cause. And then scrolling over here to the right, you're going to see the recommended action that you need to associate this unattached Elastic IP address with an approved workload or release the Elastic IP address to stop ongoing charges. AWS will charge you for Elastic IPs if you don't attach them to anything. That's just a very quick overview of how this is set up. Basically, this platform gives you the intelligence needed to be able to govern and to be able to prioritize rather than just randomly fix isolated issues. You can look at concentrations, you can see where you're having the biggest issues and what you want to focus on first. If this is something that you struggle with in your environment, please do feel free to reach out. And if not, I hope this still proves to be useful to you in some way. Thanks so much and have a great day.